5:29 a.m. Denver's cold sliced through the skin. Each breath turned to white vapor. A man stepped out of a rental car wearing an old hoodie, faded jeans, and sneakers caked with mud. No one gave him a second glance. No one said hello. No one knew. He was Ethan Park, the quiet yet powerful CEO of Orion Tech, a global tech conglomerate. Once a year, Ethan left his 45th floor glass office, abandoning the numbers, the charts, the forecasts, to walk into his own company as a new hire. No assistant, no cameras, no one knew who he was. He called it the silent test, a challenge he set for himself. This year, he chose the customer service center, the farthest place from the spotlight in the entire system. A basement floor with aging paint, crammed desks, ringing phones, and faces he only knew from productivity reports. And if it weren't for that sound of crying, Ethan might have walked straight through the lobby without ever turning around. In the far corner of the parking lot, behind an industrial dumpster, sat an old sedan blanketed in frost. The windows were fogged up, no lights, no movement. But then a small cry echoed from within. Ethan stopped. His instinct as a father made him turn around. Through the fogged-up glass, he saw a figure moving inside. A young woman, probably in her 20s. Dark circles under her eyes. She was soothing a newborn in the back seat, changing a diaper while warming a bottle with a plug-in heater. Her motions weren't clumsy, they were practiced and precise. This wasn't a makeshift night. This was home. Ethan didn't step closer. He didn't call security. He simply stood in silence, watching her wrap the baby in a blanket, kiss the child's forehead, fix her hair, pick up her bag, and walk into the company building through the side entrance. As she passed, the light from the signage revealed her face clearly. Lena Rivera, the customer service employee who had just been recognized last month for her outstanding performance. In the break room, Ethan watched Lena through the mirror. She applied a little lipstick, tied her hair, straightened her collar. Her face didn't show pain, only a strange sense of calm, as if everything was fine. She stepped out right on time, sat down at her desk as if she hadn't just woken up in a freezing car, cradling her baby under the October sky. No one knew, no one asked. Only Ethan sitting at the desk beside her. Under the disguise of a new hire, quietly opened his notebook and wrote the very first line, Day 1. Lena Rivera arrived the earliest. No one saw her step out of that car, but I did, and I can't pretend I didn't. Ethan had once believed his company had done enough, that the system was working, that people were being respected. But that morning, in one small, fleeting moment, he knew he had been wrong. Not wrong out of cruelty. Wrong because he had never looked deep enough. And maybe it was time to ask the biggest question at Orion Tech. Do we truly know? Who's sleeping in their car just to show up smiling the next morning and save the entire department with one customer service call? Ethan looked over at Lena. She was nodding to a coworker, beginning a new day, and he knew this undercover journey wouldn't end with a few lines of code improvements. It would change the life of one person, and maybe An entire system. Day 2. Ethan arrived early. 5:15 a.m. and Lena was already there. The same faded car parked in the same corner beside the dumpster, where there were no cameras, no lights. He sat in his own vehicle, lights off, watching. Inside, Lena was gently wiping her baby's face, changing the diaper, then kissing the child's forehead. She placed the baby in the seat, buckled the strap with her left hand, and poured warm milk from a thermos with her right. There was no clumsiness, only the swift, practiced motion of someone who had done this for far too long. She never noticed him, and Ethan never looked away. Her shift began at 6:30, but by 6:05 Lena was at her desk, uniform neatly pressed, hair tied up, face fresh and bright. No one asked where she came from. No one knew where she slept, and she never told. For the first time in his life, Ethan saw someone hide an entire world behind a smile. Throughout that first week, he quietly wrote everything down, not with the eyes of a CEO, but with the instincts of a man who once grew up poor and never forgot what it felt like to be cold and hungry at 5 years old. Day 3. Lena helped a new employee understand the customer feedback system. No one asked her to. She didn't need recognition. Day 4. An angry customer screamed into the phone. The agent at the next desk broke down in tears. Lena stepped in, handled the call in under 3 minutes. The customer ended with an apology. During lunch break, while others ate sandwiches and scrolled their phones, Lena opened an old laptop, put on her headphones, and studied Python through a digital library. The company Wi-Fi signal was weak, so she had to sit near the hallway for a stronger connection. Ethan happened to walk by and heard her whisper to herself, "It's okay to go slow, as long as you're still moving forward." He didn't ask anything, but he remembered clearly. Friday evening, 7:15 p.m. Only a few people remained in the office. Lena still hadn't left. She was reviewing customer feedback in the system cases, so complex they were often overlooked. Ethan pretended he needed help. She cheerfully explained each step, her eyes lighting up as she spoke about user experience, emotional touch points, and how we're not serving software, we're serving the humans using that software. Then she smiled. "A lot of people think I'm just a single mom, but really, I'm quietly preparing for a different life. I just hope my daughter won't have to learn how to fall asleep in a parking lot." Her words were light as air, but to Ethan, it felt like a brick hit him square in the chest. He drove home in silence. No music, no heater, just sat in his car, staring at his own reflection in the glass. And for the first time in years, he wasn't sure he had built a company to be proud of. Maybe his systems ran smoothly. Maybe the revenue was growing steadily. But if someone like Lena, resilient, kind, professional, was still sleeping in her car, what was being missed in all those polished reports? Ethan opened his notebook and wrote a line, "I need to know." Does Lena stay loyal because she believes in Orion Tech, or because she has nowhere else left to believe in? He knew he couldn't help her out of pity. It had to be a test, a moment where she'd be forced to choose. Only then would he truly know if he was standing in the presence of real dignity or survival disguised as grace. And he had a plan. Sunday, 10 p.m. The top floor of Orion Tech headquarters was still lit. Ethan Park sat alone in his office with Lena's file open in front of him. The typed lines were neat. Complete performance exceeds standard by 27%. 0 absences in 8 months. Customer rating 9.7/10. And below that, a note from her team lead with additional training. Lena could become a technical team leader. Ethan didn't smile. He simply closed his eyes and remembered the way she wiped down her windshield with a wet cloth before placing her child in the seat, as if she still wanted to preserve the dignity of that old car. He picked up the phone, called Vivian Lee, his executive assistant and right hand for the past 9 years. We need to set up a scenario, top secret, and very convincing. For Lena. Yeah. Did she just turn something down? Not yet, but if we give her enough reason, she might. Vivian didn't ask anything else. She understood. Ethan never tested someone unless he intended to change the system afterward. Tuesday, 12 p.m. Lena had just returned from the daycare center. Her little girl baby Nia was healthy, cheerful, eating and sleeping on schedule. Lunch today was just a cold sandwich and a ripe banana, hurriedly eaten in the hallway, because she spent her entire break feeding Nia and changing her diaper. As she set her bag down at her desk, she heard the click of high heels stop directly behind her. "Excuse me, are you Lena Rivera?" A woman stepped forward. Navy blue suit, sharp features, a confidence so intense it bordered on intimidating. "I'm Chloe Vance, Director of Recruitment at Solaris Dynamics. We've been monitoring your profile over the past few months, and today I've come with a very special offer. A small meeting room, soft lighting, no noise. On the table lay a thick, full-color file, sealed with a red label. Confidential offer." Chloe didn't waste time. Starting salary $78,000 per year. Full health coverage for both you and your child. We'll also provide 3 months of rent assistance for a luxury apartment in Midtown. I don't have a college degree. We don't hire diplomas, Lena. We hire results. Lena opened the contract. Her hands trembled. The numbers seemed to dance before her eyes. Rent 0. Childcare costs 0. Signing bonus enough to buy a small SUV for her and Nia. Nia could have her own room, a real bed, a kitchen, a place that could truly be called home, not just a car. "Are there any conditions?" she asked, soft but steady. Chloe gave a faint smile. "Just one. You start tomorrow, and you can't give Orion Tech any notice. No time to submit a resignation. This is a strategic project. We need discretion. And..." Chloe leaned forward, pulling out another file. "We're interested in how Orion Tech handles customer complaints, specifically their interaction management software. We've heard you know it well." Lena froze, not because of the offer, but because of the tone, a certain sweetness she'd heard before. Nia's father, The man who once promised her everything as long as she stayed quiet and followed his rules. She looked down at the contract. $78,000, 3 months of free housing, great insurance, a guaranteed future. And then she asked one very small question. Does your company have an on-site daycare for infants under 12 months? Chloe hesitated for a moment. We partner with an outside provider. It's a decent setup, but not on-site like here, which means if my baby has a sudden fever, I wouldn't be able to run over and check on her. Well, yes, but with this kind of package. Thank you. Lena gently cut her off. I can't accept it. I'm sorry. Chloe was stunned. Are you sure none of this ever leaves this room? I know. Lena stood up, carefully closed the folder, and placed it back on the table. And I also know some things. If you say yes to them once, you're no longer yourself after that. Behind the one-way glass, Ethan Park had seen and heard everything. He couldn't speak. She could have escaped hardship. She could have stopped sleeping in a car. But she chose to stay for something no school ever taught and no rule ever forced: integrity and gratitude. He bowed his head, then sent one single message. That night, Denver was soaked in freezing rain. Lena parked in her usual corner of the lot, the one no one noticed. The faded Honda creaked softly as she slid open the rear door. Nia was asleep, clinging to an old stuffed bunny with one torn ear. The thin blanket Lena bought from Goodwill wasn't warm enough. She turned on a small battery-powered fan heater, but the cold wind still sliced through the cracked window and stung her hands. She sat still, arms wrapped tightly around her daughter, and her head started spinning with numbers. 78 pounds, $1,000. 3 months of free housing, full insurance. No more diapers borrowed from friends. No more splitting a pack of instant noodles for lunch. Everything had been on the table. Everything was just one signature away. And she said no. Lena pulled out her phone, opened her banking app. The balance stared back cold and indifferent, $47,081. She had already set aside half for Nia's next can of formula and the remaining doses of her cough medicine. She knew winter was coming. She knew there would be nights when the temperature dropped below 0. And this old car wasn't a home. She knew. Her hand reached for the folder Chloe had given her earlier that afternoon. She hadn't thrown it away. On those pages was a new life, an opportunity to step out of the shadows, an offer that most single mothers would dream of receiving. But then Chloe's voice echoed in her mind, and we also need to know a little more about how Orion Tech handles customer systems. The smile, the sideways glance, the softened tone. Lena no longer saw the contract. She saw Nia's face at age 5 if one day her daughter were to discover that her mother once traded her dignity for the illusion of stability. She could endure the cold. She could skip meals. She could survive more sleepless nights, but she couldn't live with herself if her daughter grew up in a home built on betrayal. Wind howled outside the car. A crack of thunder split the sky. Nia stirred, whimpered softly. Lena gently patted her back, kissed her forehead, then pulled out the old laptop from beneath the seat. The same laptop she had bought with her first month's wages, its screen dim. Battery at just 20%. She connected to Orion Tech's Wi-Fi from a distance weak signal. But enough. Opened a Gmail tab. Typed in Chloe's email address. Her fingers hovered for a long moment above the subject line regarding the Solaris offer. Then she began to type. "Thank you for your interest. I've given it careful thought and I must respectfully decline the offer. I choose to stay, not because I don't need the money, but because I need to hold on to the one thing that allows me to still be myself. Wishing you all the best." She hit send. Done. No second guessing. A flash of lightning lit up the sky, casting her reflection onto the rearview mirror. Tired, worn, but at peace. For the first time in weeks. Lena smiled, not because anyone asked her to, but simply because she knew she had done the right thing. Before going to sleep, she pulled out a small notebook and wrote a few lines. "My dearest daughter, today I turned down a life-changing offer because I wanted to show you with actions that there are some things once sold can never be bought back. Kindness, gratitude, and dignity." Nia drifted back to sleep quickly. The wind still howled outside. The car was still cold. But inside Lena something had warmed. Not because she gained anything, but because she hadn't lost the one thing that mattered most. 7:12 a.m. Lena pushed open the door to the work area. Dark circles under her eyes, but her posture was upright. She had just made it through a nearly sleepless night, thunder outside, a congested baby whimpering softly, and her mind still echoing with the numbers from the contract she had turned down. She hadn't told anyone, and didn't plan to. What she needed to do was start her shift like every other day. A cup of hot coffee was already waiting at her desk. A small note was stuck to the lid. In familiar handwriting, "Morning coffee for the strongest woman on the team." Jim Lena smiled softly. It had to be from that always smiling temp guy who joined a few weeks ago, the one who somehow remembered she drank decaf with barely any sugar. She booted up her computer, ready to take her first call of the day, when the email chime pinged. "HR department, urgent. Please report to executive suite, room 1500, immediately." Her heart skipped a beat. Executive suite. The top floor of the building, a place frontline employees like her had never set foot in. A flood of worst-case scenarios rushed through her mind. Did someone find out I'm living in my car? Am I being reported for turning down Solaris? Did I break some policy without knowing it? She took a deep breath, picked up Nia from the daycare and asked one of the staff to watch her a little longer. Ting. The elevator doors opened. In front of her was a completely different world, marble floors, expansive glass walls, floods of natural light. The scent of fresh wood and premium coffee blended together, luxurious, yet distant. A woman's voice called out, "Good morning. Ms. Rivera, please come with me." Lena turned around. Chloe Vance. The woman from Solaris yesterday, now wearing an Orion Tech executive badge, a crisp white blouse, and a smile as if they had never met. Lena froze. Chloe wasn't from Solaris. She was from Orion Tech, and all of it had been a test. They stepped into a large conference room. Only one person sat at the head of the table, his back turned, light grey suit, jet black hair, neatly trimmed, his posture straight like every CEO you'd see in a documentary. When he turned around, Lena froze. Jim, the cheerful co-worker, the guy who made her coffee, the one who quietly listened when she talked about learning to code. He wasn't Jim. He was Ethan Park, CEO of Orion Tech. "I'm sorry for the deception." "Lena," he said gently, but sincerely, "I needed to understand what kind of company we're really running from a perspective no one's brave enough to tell the truth from." Lena still hadn't sat down. Her hands trembled slightly. Ethan stepped forward and pulled out a chair. "You're not being fired. You haven't done anything wrong. Quite the opposite. You just taught us one of the most important lessons we've ever received, that honesty, if it can survive even in the cold and hunger, deserves to be protected with every resource we have." He placed a folder on the table. It looked just like the one from yesterday, except this time it bore the Orion Tech logo. "Before you open it," he said, "I want you to know this. I'm not doing this out of pity. I'm doing it because you deserve it." Lena opened the folder. At the top, in bold letters, "Promotion Offer, Director of Customer Experience Innovation. Strategic Division included. A salary 3 times her current pay. A luxury apartment right next to the company headquarters. Free daycare for Nia." And at the bottom, handwritten in blue ink, "Thank you for reminding us why Orion Tech was truly built in the first place." Lena couldn't speak, not because she was emotional, but because she still couldn't believe this was real. Ethan looked at her. "I need you to start immediately. In 1 hour, there's a board meeting, and I want them to hear about this company from someone who once had to live outside its system." Lena lifted her head. There was no trace left of the woman who once lived in a car. Only a woman who had once refused to sell out what was right now ready to transform the very system she once stood outside of. 5:45 p.m. Apartment 2301, 23rd floor. Orion Tech Residence. Just across the street from company headquarters. Lena stood silently in the doorway, left arm holding Nia, right hand clutching the key just handed to her by the building manager. The door swung open and the dream became real. Polished wooden floors, warm yellow lighting, an open kitchen fully stocked, a bright living room with a soft rug, a small sofa, and a bookshelf already lined with children's storybooks. But what nearly made Lena break down in tears was the second bedroom. Inside, a spotless white crib sat by the window. Above it, a hanging mobile of glittering stars, just like the game Lena used to play with Nia in the car, Let's Count the Stars Tonight. On the shelf, a brand new bottle, infant clothes, cotton towels, and a small handwritten card. Welcome to the first room of your life. From those who believe in your mother. Lena held Nia tightly in her arms. She didn't cry. She simply exhaled one long breath, as if finally releasing an invisible weight that had clung to her neck for nearly a year. A soft knock sounded at the door. She opened it. Vivian, Ethan's assistant, stood there holding a shopping bag. A few business outfits were ordered ahead for you, all in your exact size from onboarding. How do you even know my size? Lena asked, half laughing, half stunned. Vivian winked. We have our sources. Don't worry, nothing invasive. Let's just say we've been preparing for the person who's about to change this whole system. That night, Lena cooked dinner in a real kitchen for the first time. She made rice, boiled vegetables, and a little chicken soup for Nia. Not with a microwave in a break room, not sneaking bites in the car. A real meal under soft yellow lights, the bubbling of a pot on the stove, and her daughter's giggles echoing in the background. After putting Nia to sleep, Lena stood by the tall glass window, looking down at the parking lot behind the Orion Tech building. Just a month ago, she had curled up in that lot with her baby, covering the windows with foil to keep in the warmth. The old parking spot was now empty, but in Lena's eyes, it still held every trace the scent of midnight formula, the soft hum of the mini fan, and Nia's eyes looking up at her with absolute, unwavering trust. She turned back to her desk. On her laptop screen was the document for tomorrow's board meeting. Title: Frontline Employee Experience. Reform. Phase 1 Proposal. The first page had 3 bullet points. Discrete monitoring system to identify employees in crisis without violating privacy. Internal bridge between customer service and tech teams to create promotion pipelines. Mentorship network for single mothers, single fathers, veterans, and immigrants. She typed one more line beneath them. The only thing worse than not helping someone in need is making them believe they have to hide their struggle just to be accepted. She didn't write it as a newly promoted executive. She wrote it as someone who had once lived in the shadows of the system and now wanted to turn it into a light for others. Near midnight, she stood beside Nia's bed, gently adjusted the blanket, and turned on a soft lullaby. Nia slept peacefully, her face relaxed, no longer scrunched up like the nights spent in a car seat. Lena whispered, "We're not at the finish line yet, baby girl. But this time, we're starting from somewhere real." Then she sat down at the edge of the bed, and for the first time in years, she didn't need to set an early alarm to sneak into a public restroom to wash up before anyone noticed her. She just needed to sleep and get ready for a meeting where she would no longer be someone surviving, but the one rewriting the rules. 9:00 a.m. Conference room, 16th floor, Orion Tech headquarters. A room usually reserved for multi-million-dollar strategic battles this morning fell into complete silence. 9 people, all vice presidents, division heads, and senior strategists. And now they had been instructed to turn off all screens, put down their phones, and just listen. The woman standing at the head of the table wearing a perfectly fitted light grey suit had no PhD after her name, no MBA, No Ivy League degree. There was only one name on the slide: Lena Rivera, Director of Customer Experience Innovation, and one line of introduction, spoken moments earlier by Ethan Park. This woman once lived in her car, right here in this company's parking lot, but she understands our customers and our frontline staff deeper than any report ever could. Today, I didn't invite her here to tell a story. I invited her to propose a solution. Lena took a deep breath. In front of her sat the very people who once had the power to sign contracts that could have changed her life long ago. But they hadn't even known she existed. "Good morning, everyone," she began. "I'm not here to talk about poverty, because poverty is not what creates shame. It's invisibility inside a large system that causes people to lose hope." The room fell completely still. I've read the reports on employee engagement. I've seen those sky-high employee satisfaction scores. But if I may, let me share just one simple image. She clicked to the next slide. A faded Honda, parked behind a dumpster, hidden in plain sight. This is where I lived for 11 months, right beneath your offices. I worked 47 hours a week, never missed a single shift. I held the highest customer satisfaction score of the quarter, and yet no one knew I was bathing with wet wipes and asking the daycare for emergency formula. Silence spread across the room like a cold mist. A few heads lowered. One man adjusted his tie, avoiding eye contact with the screen. Lena continued, "I'm not telling you this to ask for sympathy. I'm telling you because if I, someone who was still meeting standards, was sleeping in a car, then how many others have we missed?" She advanced to the next slide. Internal project proposal, second light. Rebuilding the frontline employee experience. 3 core components. Internal signal radar. Gathers silent struggle indicators from employees without breaching privacy. Cross-department mentorship network. Allows frontline employees to connect with mentors in other divisions, creating real pathways for role transitions. An unconditional emergency fund offers temporary financial support to employees in crisis without complex approval processes. And then she said, "We talk about retention, but the truth is, some people don't need to be retained, they just need to be seen." One of the board members, Nora, the head of HR, raised her hand. "Lena, if Ethan hadn't discovered you in that car that day, would any of this have happened?" "No." Lena replied calmly. "And that is the problem. We're running a system where the chance to change your life depends on luck. I want to change that." The room fell silent again. Ethan sat at the end of the table. He looked at each person, saying nothing, just listening, as if, for the first time, they were finally listening too. Lena closed her laptop. "I don't need your gratitude. I just need one promise that no other Lena will have to wait until the CEO randomly walks by to finally be heard." She bowed her head, and the entire room stood up, spontaneously. No one told them to. Ethan clapped first. Then, one by one, each person followed, genuine, without performance. Lena hadn't just launched a project. She had just uncovered a truth. and no one in that room would ever look at frontline employees the same way again. 2 weeks after the historic meeting, the 12th floor of the Orion Tech building was renovated into a pilot space for a new program. Its original code name was Project 42, but Lena renamed it Second Light. A light for those who once thought all they had left was darkness. The program launched quietly, no press conference, no PR articles, just one internal email sent to team leads in customer service, logistics, engineering, and maintenance. In that email, Lena didn't talk about benefits. She didn't try to inspire. She simply wrote, "If there's someone on your team who arrives unusually early, who signs up for extra shifts but rarely shares about their life, who used to shine and has suddenly dimmed, don't judge. Send their name to this address. We will listen, no interviews, no evaluations, no records. We ask only one question, are you really okay?" In the first week, only 5 names were submitted. By the second week, 28. By the end of the first month, 104. A mother of 3 who had been sleeping in the break room because she couldn't afford rent after her divorce. A technician hiding a shoulder injury, working through pain every day, terrified of losing his income. A veteran hired under a priority program who was haunted by the sound of the morning alarm bell. Each story was a quiet storm hidden behind a name badge and a perfectly timed smile. And every single one of them received a personal call from the Second Light team. No one asked, why? Only one question mattered. What do you need right now? One of Lena's first decisions as director was to remove the proof of hardship requirement for accessing emergency support. If someone has to write a formal request explaining why they have nowhere to sleep, then they probably no longer have the energy to survive, she said. She authorized a $500 advance for any employee in crisis, no signature required. She instructed the in-house daycare to extend their hours by 2 extra flexible evening hours for parents working night shifts. She proposed a mentorship model not run by executives, but by employees who had lived through hardship themselves, paid to support their colleagues as peer mentors. 1 year later, the system reported voluntary turnover among frontline staff dropped by 34%. Internal promotions nearly doubled. And what surprised Ethan most, customer satisfaction scores rose as well, because when people are treated like humans, they serve others with their whole heart. Lena walked through the new Second Light office, not large, not fancy, just walls covered in sticky notes, thank you messages, anonymous stories, and scribbled handwriting from night shift employees. One note made her stop for a long while. Thank you, Ms. Lena. Because of you, I now believe I don't have to be perfect to be heard. I just have to be real enough. Lena smiled, not out of pride, but because the very system she once survived was finally learning how to help others heal. National Convention Center, Washington, D.C. Annual Summit on Corporate Culture innovation. This year's theme, redefining engagement when people are no longer just assets. The event was hosted by the CEO of a major investment firm. After a morning filled with talks on AI, software systems, and qualitative data analysis, the moderator smiled and said, "We'll close this morning's session with a real-world case study, not from a lab, but from a parking lot where one CEO once discovered the greatest talent of his life, sleeping in her car." The room fell silent. The woman who stepped onto the stage had a poised frame, hair neatly pinned up, a light grey suit, no jewelry, and a thin folder in hand. Her name appeared in bold on the slide behind her, Lina Rivera, Vice President of People Development, Orion Tech, founder of the Second Light program, now adopted by 19 other corporations. Lina didn't speak about the old car. She didn't talk about sleeping with her child in a winter parking lot. She began with a single question. How many of you have ever felt like you missed someone on your team, not because you didn't care, but because they were hiding what they were going through? More than half the room raised their hands. Lina gave a soft nod. Me too. I was once the person who got missed. But what hurt more was when I almost missed myself. The second slide appeared a chart showing the impact of the Second Light program. 98% of participants stayed with the company after 12 months, and 64% were promoted within 2 years. 87% returned as mentors to support others. She spoke, Second Light doesn't create heroes. It creates space for ordinary people to fall down without being discarded, to step back without being forgotten. The next slide showed a series of portraits, a veteran with PTSD now leading the security team, a single mother now heading logistics, a deaf employee now an in-house trainer at Orion Tech's Learning Center. Each photo told a story, but they were no longer just inspiring stories. They were infrastructure, living data, proof that humanity doesn't conflict with performance. After the talk, a young female CEO approached Lina and asked, "If you could choose just one thing you've learned in the past 5 years, what would it be?" Lina didn't hesitate. "It's this: sometimes what people need isn't a new policy. It's a person willing to sit down, not to ask, 'Are you okay?' but to ask, 'Where would you like to begin again?'" On the flight back to Denver that evening, Lina gazed out the window. The city lights sparkled below like stars, so much like the little mobile that once hung above Nia's crib. She pulled out a small notebook and flipped to the first page. Still, there was the line she had written on a rainy night long ago: "I don't need to live a great life. I just need to not lose what's right, even if it brings me nothing." Lina smiled, but this time, doing what was right had changed an entire system. Saturday, 6:00 a.m. The penthouse on the 31st floor of Orion Tech residence remained quiet. Inside, Nia, now 6 years old, slept peacefully, still hugging the same old bunny with the torn ear. Lina slipped on a light coat, poured herself a cup of tea, and quietly stepped out, not waking anyone. No driver, no meeting scheduled, just a ritual. She had kept every weekend for the past 5 years. She made her way down to the old parking lot, the far corner, where the light still flickered and the wind still cut through like it did that first day. There was no faded Honda anymore, just an empty space. But to Lena, it was never just a parking spot. She sat on the concrete steps nearby, pulled a small piece of paper from her coat pocket. "My dearest daughter, if one day I'm no longer here, and life feels so hard you want to disappear, find a quiet place, like this corner of the lot, then close your eyes, and remember every beautiful thing I ever did began in a place no one believed anything could bloom." She still remembered the sound of the wind howling through the car door that October, the sting of the cold as she wrapped Nia in an old coat, the smell of the wet wipes she used to wash her face in the building's ground floor restroom, and the way her baby girl, still too young to speak, looked at her as if to say, "Mommy, I believe in you." That memory didn't make Lena weaker. It reminded her why she was strong. Around 7 a.m., an SUV pulled up nearby. A man stepped out, Marcus, Lena's husband, now a legal advisor at Orion Tech. "You're still coming down here this early?" he asked. "Yeah," Lena smiled. "I need to remember where I started, so I never sit in a boardroom and forget the ones still sitting in their cars." He didn't say anything more. He simply handed her a hot coffee from their usual cafe. "When Nia wakes up, she'll ask, 'Where's Mommy? Who's she telling the car story to this time?' Next time," Lena grinned, "let her come with me, so she'll know. That car once was the whole world." They sat together in silence. The sky slowly brightened. In the distance, a sign lit up in the morning sun, the Rivera Center for Second Light. That building now held temporary housing for employees in crisis-free preschool for single parents, on-site mental health and career support offices. But more important than any of that was the fact that every single person who had once been helped there came back to be the next one to reach out a hand. Not because they owed Lena anything, but because they knew what it felt like to be seen before they fell. Back home, Nia was sitting by the window, reading a book. She ran up and hugged her mother, whispering, "Mommy, tell me the car story again." Lena sat down, pulling her daughter into her arms. Once upon a time, there was a mom and a little girl. They lived in a car not because they were lazy, but because the world had momentarily forgotten them. What happened next? Mommy. Well, one day, a man started bringing Mommy coffee every morning. She thought he was just the new guy, but it turned out he was the one running the entire company. A king, yes, a kind of king who knew how to listen. Nia burst into laughter. Lena hugged her tighter, her eyes drifting off, gazing through the glass toward the place where every old wound had now taken root and grown into something kind for someone else. Winter, year 5. Orion Tech was entering a time of great transition. Ethan Park, founder and CEO for over 2 decades, had just sent out an internal announcement: "I will be retiring next quarter. A new chapter is coming." The entire company buzzed with speculation. Who would succeed him? A few big names floated around the CFO, known for handling major acquisitions, the head of market expansion, well connected across the industry, an executive being recruited in from another major tech conglomerate. But then, one quiet Monday afternoon, Lena found a slim folder placed on her desk. No letter, no cover sheet, only one handwritten line on the front. If I hadn't seen you in that car that day, I might have missed the next CEO of my own company. Ethan. She opened the folder. Inside was an official nomination letter from Ethan Park for the role of his successor, and a blank acceptance form meant for the nominee to decide whether or not to sign. Lena read the line at the top of the page. CEO candidate, cultural architect and people strategy, leader for the transition era. She placed her hands on the desk. No rush, no celebration, just a long, steady exhale. That evening, she sat quietly in the living room. Nia was already asleep. Lena opened her laptop and scrolled through her photo library. One of the first images, Nia in a tiny crib at that old rental room, grinning beside a bottle of formula. She thought of the words she had once said, "I don't need to be a leader. I just want this system to be fair for people like me." But now she knew to build real fairness, it couldn't just come from changing the system from within. Sometimes you had to be the one holding the pen, rewriting the rules. The next day, Ethan invited her for a walk around the Orion Tech campus. They strolled past the Rivera Center, once a parking lot, now the national hub for employee support. I never imagined I'd step down. Ethan said, "But then I met you." Lena said nothing. Ethan turned to face her directly. "I don't need the best operator. I need someone who, when given power, still chooses to sit down rather than stand above everyone else. And I believe you're that person." That weekend, Lena returned to the old parking lot one last time, as someone who once lived there. She placed her hand on the concrete wall, eyes resting on the inscription carved into the bronze plaque beneath the statue. This is where second light began. In silence. In a car. In a woman's decision to keep her dignity even when no one was watching. She pulled out a pen, signed the form. No trembling, no chin held high like in the movies. Just writing with her right hand while keeping her left in the coat pocket, where the first photo of her and Nia had stayed, folded neatly in her wallet for the past 5 years. The press conference announcing the new CEO. A grand auditorium filled with media, employees from every level, non-profit leaders, and corporate partners. Ethan Park stepped onto the stage, his hair now more silver than black, but his voice as steady as it was in the early days of founding Orion Tech. "Today, I'm not just passing on leadership," Ethan said. "I'm passing on a philosophy." He turned. Lena stepped forward, still the same unassuming woman, grey suit, hair in a bun, no showiness. But her eyes, those were the eyes of someone who had walked through what no one should ever have to, and was still standing tall. The entire auditorium rose to their feet, applauding not for a title, but because everyone in that room knew the story she had lived. In her inauguration speech, Lena didn't talk about strategy, market share, or the future of AI. She told a story. 5 years ago, I lived in a car, right in the parking lot of this company. I showed up on time. I did my job, and no one asked if I was okay. She paused, letting the silence stretch. I don't blame anyone, because sometimes systems aren't cruel by design. They become cruel because no one stops to remind them we are forgetting the human in one another. On the big screen behind her, a photo appeared, Lena, years ago, holding baby Nia in the back seat of a car. The worn-out blanket, the bottle, the exhaustion. Then it transitioned Nia today, in her school uniform, sitting in the front row, clapping proudly as she looked up at her mother. Lina continued, Orion Tech will no longer be a company that only builds products. We will build people, because I believe no one needs to be perfect to be trusted. They just need to be real, and have someone patient enough to truly listen to that truth. At the end of the event, a reporter raised a question. If you could send a message to those who are currently going through what you once did, what would you say? Lena looked directly into the camera. No script, no cue cards. I would say, you are not invisible. You don't have to win tomorrow. You just have to hold on to what's right, even if it brings you nothing. Because maybe the moment you say no to the easiest way out is the moment you're laying the foundation for the best version of who you're meant to become. She paused, smiled the same smile she wore the day she stepped out of that old car, fixed her hair, and walked through the company lobby. And if you're hearing this from inside a cold car, believe me, the second light is coming. Lena stepped down from the stage. Nia ran up and hugged her mother. Marcus, her husband, stood nearby, waiting below the stage, his eyes saying everything that didn't need to be spoken. Ethan stepped back to let a new generation take the lead. He knew Orion Tech would no longer just create technology. It would create a culture of hope. If you've ever believed that you're not enough, not strong enough, not skilled enough, not seen enough, this story is your reminder. It's not where you start that defines you. It's how you keep walking forward that decides who you become. Share this video with someone who might need a second light in their life, because maybe you are the one who'll bring it to them.